everyone, this blog is about ethnocentrism and relativism. Ethnocentrism is the evaluation of other cultures according to preconceptions originating in the standards and customs of one's own culture. Ethnocentrism can be a contributing factor to prejudice, racism, and xenophobia. In all these instances, you're considering yourself and your culture to be the best compared to all others. Ethnocentric people think the ways they do things is the way things should be done, and every other culture's way of doing things is unsavory or undesirable. Ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is natural and correct, while other people's cultures are incorrect, unnatural, or inferior. Example: judging other countries' diet. An example of ethnocentrism is when you judge other countries for the way they eat but don't have a moral reason for this. Expecting others to speak English. Many of us arrogantly believe that everyone should speak English to us, no matter where we are in the world. When traveling the world, many of us English speakers live with the expectation that others will speak English to us. We have this luxury because English is currently the world's dominant language, especially in business interactions. Chopsticks versus Western cutlery. This is one of the most common examples of ethnocentrism. Many Westerners could consider chopsticks to be a strange tool for eating. They appear clumsy and unnecessarily difficult to manage. But many Asian cultures where chopsticks are the norm may have opposite views. They may laugh at the clumsiness of foreigners when they use chopsticks. This might consider us to be uncultured for having to use fork, thinking you don't have an accent and everyone else does. When you grow up only hearing one accent, it starts to feel like that accent is normal and not an accent at all. You often only hear accents if they're different from your own. That's when your brain tells you that something sounds funny. According to William G. Sumner, ethnocentrism is defined as the technical name for the view of things in which one's own group is the center of everything, and all others are scaled and rated with reference to it. He described the term involves a belief or attitude that one's own culture is better than all others. Almost everyone is a little bit ethnocentric. For example, Americans tend to say that people from England drive on the wrong side of the road rather than on the other side. Someone from a country where dog meat is standard fare might find it off-putting to see a dog in a French restaurant not on the menu, but as a pet and patron's companion. A good example of ethnocentrism is referring to parts of Asia as a Far East. In the study of anthropology, ethnocentrism is the term anthropologists use to describe the opinion that one's own way of life is natural or correct. Some would simply call it cultural ignorance. Ethnocentrism means that one may see his or her own culture as the correct way of living. For those who have not experienced other cultures in depth, can be said to be exocentric, if they feel that their lives are the most natural way of living. Ethnocentrism is a term applied to cultural or ethnic bias, whether conscious or unconscious, in which an individual views the world from the perspective of his or her own group, establishing the in-group as archetypal and rating all other groups with reference to this ideal. Cultural relativism. It is the idea that a person's belief and practices should be understood based on that person's own culture. Proponents of cultural relativism also tend to argue that the norms and values of one culture should not be evaluated using the norms and values of another. It is also the principle of regarding and valuing the practices of a culture from the point of view of that culture and to avoid making hasty judgments. Cultural relativism tries to counter ethnocentrism by promoting the understanding of cultural practices that are unfamiliar to other cultures, such as eating insects, genocide, and genital cutting. Take, for example, the common practice of same-sex friends in India walking in public while holding hands. This is a common behavior and a sign of connectedness between two people. In England, by contrast, holding hands is largely limited to romantically involved couples and often suggests a sexual relationship. These are simply two different ways of understanding the meaning of holding hands. Someone who does not take a relativistic view might be tempted to see their own understanding of this behavior as superior and perhaps the foreign practice as being immoral. Types of cultural relativism. Absolute cultural relativism indicates that whatever activities are practiced within a culture, no matter how weird and dangerous they appear to be, should not be questioned by other cultures. An example of absolute cultural relativism is the tying of feet of Chinese women in the 19th and 20th centuries. Though this culture later became abolished, other cultures had no contribution to its practice. The practice appeared torturous to women for the purpose of beauty. According to history, Chinese people found small feet in women as a symbol of beauty. Therefore, for women to get married, they had to go through the process of feet beautification. The process involved tying a young lady's feet to inhibit its growth. Women from rich families were mostly able to undergo this practice since it was difficult for a person with such tight feet to move around and make a living. Other cultures shunned this practice, but they had no influence over it. Critical cultural relativism asks questions about cultural practices and why they are practiced. It seeks answers about the cultural practices in line with who is accepting them and why they are doing so. An example of critical cultural relativism is when the residents of Spain practice El Culacho, which is a baby jumping ritual practiced since 1620. It is said that jumping over the babies chases the devil and keeps them safe. This practice has been critiqued by people seeking answers as to its relevance in protecting the children. Francois. By studying this indigenous group, Bois introduced the theory of cultural relativism, which is the idea that all people have equally developed cultures. This theory also holds the belief that the differences between peoples were the result of historical, social, and geographic conditions. Cultural relativism is the idea that cultures cannot be objectively evaluated as higher or lower, better or worse, right or wrong. From the perspective of the cultural relativist, cultures can only be judged on their own terms. That's all, thank you.